Okay. You can just
Yeah.
Action. Next up is Sarah Karoff with her talk, Troubling the Idea of Trouble.
Before I begin, I would like to let you all know that my presentation mentions some potentially triggering content, including child abuse and sexual assault. If you would like to step outside, please feel free to do so. There's no day I remember as clearly as September 8th, 2008. It's the day my little sister was born, and it was the worst day of my life. I was ecstatic to have a baby sister. Don't get me wrong, but my nanny wouldn't let me push the elevator button on the way up to the delivery floor at Northern Westchester Hospital. This was my punishment for refusing to hold her hand while we crossed the parking lot. She thought I was resisting authority, and I guess technically I was. But you see, I just wanted to hold my big brother's hand instead. He was, and still is, one of my biggest role models. And I was so excited to be a big sibling because I wanted to be just like him. I wanted to feel him holding my hand so that I could hold my soon-to-be sister's hand the same way. I tried to explain this to my nanny, but she did not want to hear it. In her eyes, she was right, and I was wrong. She was the adult, and I was just the disobedient child. In the next 10 minutes, we will first take into consideration the perspective of the child, as well as how it feels to be one in today's society. We will then analyze our current expectations of children, as well as our treatment of them, looking specifically at the long-term effects our current resistance to troublemaking has on their development. Next, we will directly compare these findings to a scandal that has recently taken nearly every media platform by storm, while we discuss the contributions made by our current parenting and teaching philosophies. Lastly, we will ponder some incredibly simple methods in adapting our mindset, in hopes of raising a generation of strong-willed, independent beings that fear neither setting boundaries nor fighting for change. You may think it's a little dramatic to refer to my sister's birthday as the worst day of my life, but that's truly how it felt in the moment. I was born in the midst of a divorce. My father had left my family. I had seen death and disease and addiction, and still, to 5-year-old me, this topped all of that, significantly. I was being punished for not giving somebody consent to touch me. Even as a child, I knew how wrong that was. I knew I was deserving of bodily autonomy, but I could tell nobody else seemed to care. And I also knew that there was nothing I could really do about that, at least not on my own. As adults, we assume children don't know what they're talking about, that they don't know what's best for them, that they need us to make every decision for them. They tell us what they want. We disagree. They ask us why, and we give them the 4 words we hated so much not long ago. Because I said so. I remember the fire I felt racing through my veins every time my mom or teacher or nanny said these words to me. There I was, a human being, often the smallest human being in the room, just trying to understand the world around me. I asked a million questions because I was learning a million new things a day. Unfortunately, I rarely learned these many things from the wise adults in my life with decades of experience. When I asked them my questions, I was told, "Not now," or "You're not old enough to understand." So, I found my own answers. I caused trouble, and I faced the consequences. According to former elementary educator and current elementary scholar, Carla Shalaby, instead of encouraging our children to build their own paths, we punish them for stepping out of line. We're raising soldiers when we should be raising advocates. We are teaching our children to follow the leader, to do what Simon says, to do things because somebody said so. They ask us why, and we give them excuses, but we don't give them answers. They attempt to speak out against experienced injustice, and we put them in timeouts. In her book, Troublemakers, Lessons in Freedom from Young Children at School, Shalaby calls us in on how we force children to associate making trouble with getting in trouble. So they grow up to fear trouble. And in turn, they grow up to avoid it. As children, we avoid trouble. We believe we will only be our teacher's favorite if we do as our teacher says. As teenagers, we avoid trouble. We believe our parents will only stop yelling at us if we do as our parents say. And as adults, we still avoid trouble. We believe our partners will only stay with us if we do exactly as our partners say. So when in doubt, we bite our tongues. We stay quiet, and we stay still. We can't be punished if we can't be seen. A prime example of this is one you may have heard about recently, the child stars of Nickelodeon. According to the docuseries Quiet on Set, Nickelodeon has had 3 pedophiles, 2 convicted, that raped, assaulted, and harassed numerous minors they were working with. Staff member Jason Handy even wrote in his diary, "I am a pedophile, full blown." The children and parents alike were taught not to cause trouble, not to make a scene, and that they would be sure to face the consequences if they did. Nowhere in the children's job descriptions did it say that they were in charge of anything, including themselves. They were expected to do as they were told, both on and off camera. Their job was to understand their insignificant and powerless role, both in this industry and on this planet as a whole. So for years, they accepted this role, until they couldn't anymore. Finally, the victims are speaking out. I don't just mean holding their assaulters accountable by law, but holding them accountable in the eyes of the public. In this docuseries, the victims share the fear they felt when fighting authority, and the backlash they faced when they tried to cause trouble. They share the most vulnerable parts of themselves that up until now have purely been used against them. We told them to behave. We told them that the adults know what's best, unconditionally. We told them to stay out of trouble. So they did. They were silent. We all, collectively, had silenced them. Just as we do all of our children. just as our parents did to us and their parents to them. If only we taught these kids, if only we taught every kid how to make trouble instead of not to make trouble, they wouldn't grow up to fear picking battles that so desperately need to be fought. They would know that while they can't turn everything into an argument, sometimes they should. Sometimes they must. Building on the work of John Dewey, Carter G. Woodson, and many other educational philosophers, as well as teachers, psychologists, activists, and students, our educational systems have progressed greatly throughout the years. Still, they haven't progressed nearly enough. In my opinion, these philosophies don't concern progressive education so much as progressing education. As the world keeps changing, we have to change alongside it. We have to raise our children not to survive and flourish in the world we lived in, but in the world they live in. We have to stop forcing our children to accept things as they are. They're smarter than that, and so much more capable. In a way, I'd say they're smarter than us even. They have yet to be taught that the most important thing in life is to obey those in charge of us. They have yet to be brainwashed that the only trouble they get into is the trouble they cause. If we teach our children to hold people accountable, their adult selves will hold people accountable. If we teach our children to trust their instincts, to talk back, to speak up for themselves, their adult selves will do so. And if we teach our children to say the word no, and we teach them that they are allowed to say it to anybody, regardless of status, they won't grow up to fear setting boundaries. They won't grow up to fear advocacy. They will grow up to embrace it. Right now, we constantly remind our children of how tiny they are, so they grow up believing that they are small. I may not know what it's like to raise a child, but I know what it's like to be one. I know what it's like to look up at everyone and everything while the rest of the world literally looks down on you. And I stand here before you, asking you, begging you to listen. To ask your child for consent before taking off their sweater. To ask him if he understands why his parents don't live together anymore. To ask her why she doesn't want to hold your hand while you cross the parking lot. Maybe she just wants to hold her big brother's hand instead. They may be shorter than us, and they may be younger than us, but let us finally stop saying that they're smaller than us.